The storm outside the Spencer estate was nothing compared to the one gathering behind its gleaming windows. For months, Will and Electra had lived in the fragile calm that follows grief, the kind of silence where every heartbeat echoes a loss too vast to name. Luna's death had torn a hole through their lives, leaving behind questions that no one dared to voice and memories that haunted every room. They had tried to move on, tried to believe that time could dull the ache. And then, one morning in late autumn, a faint blue line appeared on a test, and everything changed. At first, the pregnancy felt like a miracle. Will had wept when Electra told him, not out of fear or confusion, but sheer gratitude. It was, he said, a second chance, the universe's way of rewriting the ending they never got with Luna. Electra smiled and cried with him, letting herself believe in hope again. For a while, their laughter returned to the house, soft and hesitant like sunlight after rain. But the world beyond their walls was less forgiving. News spread quickly. The media pounced on it with a cruel hunger that always followed the Spencers. A replacement child, one headline sneered. Spencer Baby 2.0, another declared, as if the baby growing inside her was not a life but a sequel. Electra stopped reading after the third article. But the damage had already been done. Everywhere she went, she felt the stares, the whispers. Even well-meaning acquaintances spoke in tones laced with pity, as though her pregnancy were a desperate attempt to fill an absence that could never be filled. At first, Will brushed it off. Let them talk, he told her. We know the truth. But the truth was that he was beginning to feel the cracks widening again, the same helplessness that had consumed him when Luna slipped away. He began to watch her too closely. Every time she winced, every time she rested her hand on her stomach, he tensed. He insisted on accompanying her to every appointment, double-checking every doctor's advice, hovering like a shadow even in the quietest moments. What began as concern slowly became control. He monitored her diet, her sleep, even the air she breathed. When she wanted to visit her friends, he hesitated. It's better if you stay home, he said softly, with the same tone his father once used when trying to protect Katie from the world. Bill's house had become their refuge after Luna's death, a sanctuary Will swore would keep Electra safe. But as the weeks passed, Electra began to feel that the safety came at a cost. The sprawling mansion, with its guarded gates and endless rooms, began to feel like a prison gilded in glass. Cameras monitored every corner. Security guards hovered discreetly nearby. At night, when she walked through the long hallways, she could almost hear the echoes of her own confinement. She loved Will, truly, but his protectiveness was suffocating her. Every gesture of care came wrapped in fear, and every promise of safety felt like a lock turning. Katie saw it long before anyone else did. She had lived through it, Bill's obsessive need to shield the people he loved until they couldn't breathe. When she visited, she recognized the same nervous energy in Will's voice, the same restless pacing, the same haunted look in his eyes. She tried to reach him gently, to remind him that love built on fear could only crumble. But Will brushed her off. I'm not Dad, he said. I just don't want to lose her. Katie's heart broke at the way his voice cracked on the last word. She wanted to believe him, but she knew how quickly protection could become possession. As the months passed, the atmosphere in the Spencer home thickened. Electra tried to keep her composure, to smile when Will smiled, to reassure him that everything would be fine. But she was growing weaker, both from the pregnancy and from the constant pressure of being watched, guarded, managed. Sometimes, she would sneak out to the garden late at night, standing barefoot on the cold grass, breathing in the air that still felt like hers. Those moments of solitude were her only refuge. It was during one of those nights that she first noticed the figure across the fence, a shadow that lingered too long, watching from the dark. At first, she thought it was one of Bill's guards, but when she mentioned it the next morning, no one admitted to being there. Will dismissed it as her imagination, a symptom of stress, but the unease in her chest refused to fade. The presence felt real, almost familiar, as if someone out there was watching her not with curiosity, but with purpose. Then came the letters. Anonymous, typed brief. The first one arrived tucked beneath the gate. Not again. The second, you can't replace what's gone. And the third, sent directly to her doctor's office. He doesn't deserve another chance. Electra showed them to Will, who immediately called security, doubling the guards and installing more cameras. But instead of calming her, his reaction only deepened her fear. Whoever was out there knew how to strike at their weakest point. The Spencer name had always been a magnet for scandal, and as the pregnancy progressed, the scrutiny intensified. Tabloids speculated about paternity, about Electra's mental health, about Will's capacity to raise another child. One morning, a journalist shouted across the parking lot as they left the doctor's office, "Are you afraid this baby will end up like Luna?" Will lunged before the guards pulled him away, his rage exploding in public view. The next day's headlines painted him as unstable. Electra, trembling, asked him to stop going out with her, to let her handle things quietly. But he refused. "I'm not letting you out of my sight," he said. And for the first time, she saw not the man she loved, but the mirror of his father, the same desperate intensity that had once destroyed a marriage. Katie tried again to intervene. She sat with Will in the study one evening, her voice low but firm. "You're turning into him," she said. "And if you don't stop, you'll lose her before you even realize it." Will turned away, his jaw tightening. "You don't understand," he whispered. "Luna's gone because I wasn't there. I won't make that mistake again." Katie's eyes filled with tears. "You can't protect people from fate," she said softly. "All you can do is love them freely. Anything else will break them, and you." But by then, it was too late. The first sign of real danger came one stormy night in February. Electra was resting in bed when the lights flickered out. The house's emergency systems kicked in, but for a few minutes, darkness swallowed everything. When the power returned, her bedroom window was open, the curtains flapping violently in the wind. Will arrived seconds later, panicked, insisting she move into the master suite for safety. The guards searched the grounds but found nothing. Yet, deep down, Electra knew that whoever had been watching was now closer than ever. 2 weeks later, during a prenatal checkup, the doctor noticed irregularities, something wrong with the baby's heartbeat. The diagnosis was unclear, but the stress was taking its toll. Electra was ordered to rest completely. Will turned the house into a fortress, forbidding her to leave, limiting visitors, even screening her calls. "Just until we're safe," he said. But safety had become a ghost, a word that no longer meant freedom but confinement. Then one morning she was gone. The discovery shattered the illusion of control that had defined Will's every move. Her phone was found on the nightstand, her bag untouched. The security footage showed a brief blackout at 2:14 a.m., followed by static. When the cameras came back online, Electra's bed was empty. The police were called immediately, but Will didn't wait for them. He stormed out into the night, searching the coastline himself, his desperation driving him into reckless fury. Bill arrived soon after, grim and silent. For the first time in years, father and son stood united not in anger, but in terror. Katie was the one who found the clue, a single envelope slipped under the door of the Spencer offices. Inside was a photo of Electra, pale and terrified, bound to a chair in what looked like a dimly lit cabin. Scrawled across the bottom in red ink were the words, "You don't get to start over." The investigation revealed fragments of a horrifying truth. The culprit was someone connected to Luna's past, a former associate of hers from her time working abroad, a man obsessed with her memory. He blamed Will for her death, for the chaos that followed, and now sought to make him suffer the same way. To him, the new baby was an insult, a replacement for what he believed had been stolen from Luna. The kidnappers' twisted logic was simple. If Luna couldn't have her life back, neither could they. Days turned into a blur of headlines, search parties, and sleepless nights. Will became unrecognizable, haunted, hollow-eyed, consumed by guilt. He refused to rest, retracing every clue, clinging to hope with the desperation of a drowning man. Katie stayed by his side, her quiet strength holding the family together as the media vultures circled. "This is not your fault," she told him one night, but he couldn't believe her. In his mind, every decision he had made, from the isolation to the security, had led to this. When the police finally traced the signal from the photo to a cabin deep in the hills outside Los Angeles, Will insisted on going himself. Against all advice, he went, armed only with the determination of a father who had already lost once and refused to lose again. The rescue was chaotic, a blur of shouting, gunfire, and smoke, but when it was over, Electra was alive, trembling but unharmed. Her first words to him were a whisper. "You found me." Back at the hospital, doctors confirmed that the baby was weak but stable. The relief was overwhelming, but it came laced with something deeper, a realization that love, when ruled by fear, becomes its own prison. Will held her hand, weeping, as she slept, understanding at last what Katie had tried to tell him all along. Protection had cost him everything: trust, peace, even his own sense of self. When Electra awoke days later, she found Will by her side, quieter than she had ever seen him. He apologized, not for failing to protect her, but for trying too hard. "I wanted to save you," he said, voice raw, "but I didn't see that what you needed was freedom." She smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "What I needed was you," she said, "not your fear." In the weeks that followed, the Spencer home changed. The security guards were dismissed, the cameras turned off. Windows that had long been locked were opened again. The press moved on to newer scandals, and the storm around them finally began to fade. Katie visited often, her pride tempered by relief. "You broke the cycle," she told Will. "That's more than your father ever could." Months later, as Electra sat in the garden, sunlight spilling over her, Will joined her, resting a hand on her swollen belly. The baby kicked, a small, insistent reminder that life, despite everything, goes on. "What should we name her?" he asked softly. Electra smiled, looking toward the horizon. "Hope," she whispered, "because that's all we have left, and all we ever need." And for the first time in a long while, Will believed her. Not because hope promised safety, but because it promised something better: the courage to live, to love, and to let go. After the rescue, as Will and Electra finally began to rebuild their lives, a new figure appeared at the hospital, a quiet, soft-spoken doctor assigned to monitor Electra's recovery. She introduced herself as Dr. Rora Lane, a visiting specialist in trauma care. Her calm authority reassured everyone. Even Katie, wary by nature, found comfort in her presence. Yet something about the doctor's gaze unsettled Electra. Behind the professional warmth, there was a flicker of familiarity, a rhythm in her voice that seemed to echo from the past. Dr. Lane was attentive, almost too attentive. She always arrived before visiting hours, stayed later than her shift required, and knew details about Electra's case that she should not have had access to. She asked questions that felt personal, about the pregnancy, about Luna, about guilt and forgiveness. Each time, Electra answered politely but uneasily. Will, desperate for stability, welcomed the doctor's help, seeing in her a miracle worker who might finally bring peace to their home. But Katie couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen those eyes before. Late one night, while leaving the hospital, she spotted the doctor in the parking lot, her hair loose, her lab coat folded under one arm. For a brief second, the fluorescent light caught her face at a different angle, and Katie froze. The resemblance was impossible, yet undeniable. Luna. Katie didn't say anything immediately. How could she? Luna had been declared dead twice, mourned, buried, erased. Yet here she was, walking the earth again, wearing another woman's identity like a second skin. Katie began to investigate quietly, pulling old hospital records, tracing the dates of staff transfers. The truth emerged piece by piece: a falsified credential file, a background check that stopped halfway, a mysterious benefactor funding her research. Meanwhile, strange things began to happen around Electra. The medical charts were rearranged. Test results went missing. She began to experience fainting spells and dizzy spells that no doctor could explain. Each time, Dr. Lane reassured her, saying it was just anxiety, normal recovery. Will believed her. Why wouldn't he? The doctor was kind, composed, always ready with the right words. But inside, Electra felt the walls closing in again. Then came the night she woke to find the doctor sitting by her bed, watching her sleep. The look in the woman's eyes was no longer clinical, it was almost mournful. You remind me so much of her, dear. Lane whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Electra's forehead. So full of promise. So loved. When Electra blinked, the doctor was gone, leaving behind a faint scent of lavender and antiseptic. Katie confronted Will the next morning, demanding he look deeper into the doctor's past. He dismissed her worries until Electra collapsed during a follow-up visit, her condition deteriorating without explanation. When the hospital senior staff reviewed the logs, they discovered inconsistencies in the medication chart, small but deliberate alterations. The attending physician who had signed those orders was Dr. Aurora Lane. By the time they searched her office, she had vanished. Her locker was empty, her ID badge discarded in the sink. The only thing left behind was a photograph, Luna and Electra, side by side, their faces half-burned by water stains, as if someone had tried to erase them both. It was then that Will understood the scope of what had happened. Luna was alive, not as the woman he once pitied, but as a shadow moving through their lives, shaping their suffering from the margins. Whether she had acted out of vengeance, grief, or madness was unclear, but one thing was certain. She had never stopped watching. In the weeks that followed, Will became consumed by the need to find her. Katie tried to stop him, warning that some ghosts should remain buried, but he couldn't rest. He hired investigators, traced sightings, chased every rumor. Yet Luna seemed always one step ahead, appearing in security footage for seconds, vanishing into crowds. Each clue led to another dead end, another whisper of her presence. Electra, recovering slowly, tried to make peace with the loss of what might have been. She began therapy, focusing on her own strength, no longer willing to live as the victim of someone else's obsessions. If she's alive, she told Katie quietly one evening, then she's the one trapped now, haunted by what she did, by what she couldn't let go. But late at night, when the house fell silent, Electra sometimes thought she saw movement in the garden, a figure lingering at the edge of the light. She would close her eyes and whisper a silent prayer, not for protection, but for forgiveness, because she knew that some stories, once broken, never truly end. They just change their masks.